all of a sudden, one of the trailer doors slams open and Robert Wagner leans out half dressed, says, "Are you the girl this week?" I'm like, "Yeah, I guess."
Morgan Fairchild rose to fame in the 70s and 80s, and she's one of the enduring glamour girls.
She came running down the hall at the Tonight Show, and she says, "Don't ever tell them how old you are. You don't care now, but you will."
She had roles in Flamingo Road, Paper Dolls. She also was nominated for a Golden Globes Award for her role she played in Murphy Brown.
It's the being able to take a punch and keep getting up and getting back in the game is the trick to longevity in this business.
I'm Joe Ruggiero, and welcome to my podcast, Inspired, and the people who inspired me. Let's have a warm welcome for Morgan.
Thank you. Thank you for coming out.
Now, you were born in Texas, right?
Oh, yes. I'm a Dallas girl.
Uh-huh. And your dad didn't want you to go into show business.
My dad thought only whores worked in the theater. And so he did not know what we were doing downtown in the middle of the night. He's going to rehearsals. So it was a shock to him to end up with actors in the family. But, I think I finally won him over the year I got him a car for Christmas. So he couldn't believe anybody would pay me to do this. So.
Well, I can remember my dad sitting me down because I used to love to perform in high school, in college, and I did the sets and I would be starring role and what have you. And he sat me down after I graduated college and said, "No Broadway, no, and no design." So I was, faced with what am I going to do?
Yeah.
Where's my talent? So I did get accepted to the Annenberg School for Communications.
Oh, wow.
And he said that was all right because communications was something in the future.
That sounded dignified.
So we'd have something in common. Now, you went through a lot of auditions when you first came out here. A little gal from Dallas. Now, you went to New York first to visit your sister.
Well, no. I lived in New York for a long time in the 70s. My sister had got a scholarship to Juilliard. She was the second graduating acting class at Juilliard. So Patti LuPone and Kevin Kline were the class ahead of her, and Robin Williams and Christopher Reeve were the class behind her. And so my first visit up there, I just fell in love with New York. Yeah. So when I got divorced, having been a child bride, I decided I'd go up to New York and see if I could get work. And eventually I did, but there were a lot of auditions and a lot of things. And I kept being told I didn't have the right look. I was too porcelain, too elegant, too glamorous. And we want real people. I finally said to one casting person, "What do I have to do? Break my nose to get an audition here?" But then finally things clicked. I got on Search for Tomorrow. I was doing Kojak, a lot of the shows shooting there, a lot of commercials. And then I thought I would see if I could make it in LA. And so I came out here, kept my apartment in New York, just to be safe, and came out here, and I was extremely lucky and got a show within 3 weeks of being here. So I really lucked out. But in New York, yeah, a lot of no's, a lot of rejection. No agent wanted me. I had no acting agent when I got Search for Tomorrow. When I was growing up in Dallas and doing a lot of theater, starting in the theater when I was 10, some of the ways I would earn extra money was modeling and Neiman Marcus catalogs, different catalog work. So I was too short to be a model, but I could do hair and makeup and beauty products and hand and foot modeling. Yeah. And so I thought, well, I'll see if I can pick up extra money. And Eileen Ford, go over to Eileen Ford, see if they'll take me on. So I'm sitting there in the lobby, my little portfolio in my lap, and this lovely, elegant gentleman walked through, a little strategic gray at the temples, and went into his office. Then he looked out and he says, "Who are you and what are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I'm Morgan Fairchild and I'm waiting to see Eileen Ford." And he said, "Oh, well, come talk to me. I'm Gene Barakat. I'm just starting the commercial division." So eventually he said, "I'd like to take you on for the commercial division." He said, "We've got a lot of beautiful girls, but they can't talk. And you're an actress. I bet you can talk." I said, "Honey, can I talk?" So then they sent me, I wasn't getting any commercials, but they sent me over for a 3-day arc on Search for Tomorrow, and I didn't get it. But then they called back a couple of days later and said they had a young actress that they had hired 6 weeks before to play the new bad guy, and she wasn't working out. So suddenly I'm a regular on Search for Tomorrow, and I'm gainfully employed in New York and thrilled with it. But it was a lot of rejection, a lot of people saying no.
How do you handle failure? Or do you, and also, how do you handle success?
Well, I don't see them saying no as failure. I see it as rejection, but not failure. And my sister, who teaches acting now, she loves to tell her acting students one of my stories, which is when we were living together in New York when she was still in school. I would, after I'd finish on Search for Tomorrow, I would take my little portfolio and I would go out to auditions for commercials and stuff every afternoon and never get them. In New York, not like here, you're out in it. I mean, you step out of your apartment, you're heat, rain, snow, blizzard, whatever, trying to get somewhere. And I came in very bedraggled one night and she said, "Why do you keep going? You never get them. It's always the same people and you never get them." And I said, "Well, if I don't go, I have said no to myself. And I'm not going to do them that favor. I'm going to make the bastards say no to me." And so if I don't show up, I've done it to myself. So I will always show up and then they will have to say no. And eventually, I don't know if I got better or they got tired of me coming in all the time, but then I was doing like a national commercial a week. But it's the steadfastness, it's the persistence, it's the hanging in, it's the being able to take a punch and keep getting up and getting back in the game. Is the trick to longevity in this business, because no matter what stage of your career, you're going to get punched. When you're starting out, you get punched a lot. So that's what stands you instead in the long term. And when you said with success, I know when I started getting well known in the 80s, and after a while, you're doing interviews and people say, "Boy, you got your head on straight. How do you keep your head on straight with all this?" And I said, it's the same people who told me I was shit on the way up are going to tell me I'm shit on the way down. So I'm not going to listen to them either way. I'm not going to pay any attention to them. I just have my eye on what I want to do, and I just keep going. So that's
Well, you are one to be complimented because you belong to the NFL group. No finish line.
Yeah, exactly.
And you just signed a contract with The Bold and the Beautiful.
Well, I don't have a contract. I've had a recurring part on General Hospital for 2-3 years, and now I've got a recurring thing on Bold and Beautiful, which means no contract. It means you're recurring. So I don't know what they're going to do with us. We've taped 3 episodes already. One is run. 2 more will be running. And I have no idea what they'll do. But again, starting in the theater when I was 10, one of the bargains you make with yourself when you start in the theater is that you're going to be a gypsy your whole life. There will never be any kind of stability, that you will always be going from job to job. So the fact that there's no contract is par for the course. It's like,
well, I think
we float.
I think it's wonderful. Now, you have some wonderful stories to tell.
Oh, yes.
And I can remember you telling me that RJ, Robert Wagner, was very kind to you. Tell us that story.
Oh, Robert Wagner, such a sweetie. It's like my 3rd job when I got to LA. It was my first time working over at Universal. And RJ, then it was between To Catch a Thief and Heart to Heart. Right. He had another series called Switch. So I was on Switch. And I arrive at Universal, my little clothes, I'm bringing my own clothes. I'm wandering with all the sea of trailers. It's like a maze of trailers. And I have no idea where I'm going. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm kind of lost. And all of a sudden, one of the trailer doors slams open and Robert Wagner leans out half dressed, says, "Are you the girl this week?" I'm like, "Yeah, I guess. I guess I'm the girl this week." And he said, "Well, come in here. I got to talk to you." And I'm like, "Oh, God, should I go in there with this half-dressed man, even though I've loved him my whole life? I don't know if I want to be in there with a half-dressed man." Anyway, so I go in and he says, "Okay, listen, our scene, we're going to do it right after lunch." He said, "Our scene is I'm telling you all the reasons I can't go after the bad guys. And that makes me look like a coward. So I want to switch lines with you. And you tell me all the reasons I can't go after the bad guys, and I'll take your lines."
Oh.
And I said, "Okay." And he said, "Can you learn all that fast?" And I said, "Well, I hope." I don't know. So anyway, so we come back after lunch, we shoot the scene. It goes perfectly. Of course, we do the big master first. Of course, the first scene I have with him is where he's talking, and then we end up on the sofa and he's on top of me with the big clinch. You always start with the romantic, embarrassing scenes first. He's on top of me with the clinch, and then he raises up and looks down at me and says, "You're a real actress." And I said, "Yeah." And he said, they don't send us many of those. And he said, you remembered all those lines. You took everything in stride and you just went right. We got a perfect master the first time through. And then they were so sweet because it was Charlie Callis and Eddie Albert and it was their first episode of that season. So at the end of the season, they gave me one of those little fake statues, like a bowling club statue, and it said favorite guest star of the year. So I said to them, how do you know I'm the favorite of the year? It's your first episode of the year. And they said, oh no, you're funny. They don't send us many of those either. We know you're going to be our favorite.
You also have an interesting story about Pee Wee Herman, which I adore Pee Wee Herman. I don't know if anyone else knows of him, but
does everybody here know Pee Wee Herman? Oh, good. Well, so the first time I met Paul, I was hosting Night at the Improv. I had never heard of Pee Wee Herman. And so in the afternoon, we have this run through, and all the older comics come in and they do their lines, and we run through their acts. And then this younger man comes in, and he just comes over and he says, I'm not going to go through my act today. I just stopped by to tell you, whatever happens tonight, I won't hurt you. And I'm like, oh God, what is he going to do?
yeah.
So that night he comes in as Pee-wee and is jumping around on the stage, and he has a big paper bag of plastic spiders and snakes he's throwing at me and doing all this crazy stuff. And so coming from the theater, we're just improvising all over the place. And so after the show's over, he says, you got me, like people don't get me. And, you just went with it. And I said, yeah, that's what we do. So anyway, we got to be great friends. And so then he started getting nominated for a lot of awards. And so I would go with him, and I'd be in my evening gown and he'd be Pee Wee Herman and, with the Odd Couple. And then one day he calls up, and this is when I still had an answering company. And so they called up and they said, we have Pee Wee Herman on the line. I said, Paul, I know your real name. You don't have to say it's Pee Wee Herman. So he says, well, I've got my first movie. And I said, great. And he said, yeah, but, we have no money. It's a shoestring budget. We have no money. We need some celebrity cameos, and everybody's turned us down. And I said, first of all, don't tell people everyone's already turned you down. And we have no money. I said, I got the no money part. I said, when do you need me? And he said, Thursday. So I said, well, let me check with Falcon Crest and see if I can get off. So they moved a scene. So I got up, and there I arrive on the back lot at Warner Brothers, which is kind of like wilderness. And they're set up to do this ninja fight. So I go over and I say, guys, I can do the ninja fight, 4.5 years of Kung Fu in Chinatown in New York. I can do the ninja fight for you. You don't need the stunt girl unless, you have her falling out of a tree, in which case, if I break a leg, Lorimar will sue me. So, so we do the ninja fight. And then Jim Brolin arrives. And I knew Jim from doing the pilot of Hotel a couple of years
Barbara
before.
Streisand's husband.
Yes, well, now husband, not at that time. But he had a series on called Hotel, an Aaron Spelling series. And I'd done the pilot of it with Betty Davis. Anyway, so he arrives looking like Pee Wee Herman. I'm like, what are you doing? He says, I have no idea. So then Paul and the director say, well, just look at each other and say, I know you are, but what am I? And we're like, what does it mean? We have no script. We have no sides. We have nothing. We said, what does it mean? They said, it doesn't matter. It'll be funny in context. It'll be funny. So we said, okay. Well, So then we're finished. And I looked at Jim and I said, do you have to go back to work today? And he said, no, I got the whole day off. I said, yeah, so did I. You want to do more? And he said, yeah, what can we do? I said, I don't know. Let's go talk to the guys. So we go over and talk to Paul and Tim Burton. It was Tim Burton's first movie. And, and say, guys, you got us for the day. You want to do more? And so Tim is like, well, what can we do? We borrowed the back lot here. We don't have any sets. What could we do? So then Jim says, let me make a phone call. So he calls Aaron Spelling and borrows this set for Hotel that day. So the Fairmont lobby set, Aaron loaned us the Fairmont lobby set. So suddenly I'm a spy, Jim is a big game hunter, Paul is a bellhop, and we have a scene that's like paging Mr. Herman, which some people have told me is one of their favorite scenes in the movie. And it's all Mickey and Judy putting on a show in the barn.
Gosh, which is great.
It's just all totally thrown together and ad-lib back in the day when they would let you do that.
Well, you have worked with so many wonderful names. Who is the one that has inspired you the most?
Oh, I've been so lucky. I got out here at a time when a lot of the people I grew up watching were still alive and still working.
Hmm.
So, you'd go to a gala dinner and you'd be seated between Jimmy Stewart and Olivia de Havilland or Betty and, Robert Mitchum. I mean, it was just awesome to get to meet all these people that I grew up with and then get to work with Betty and get to work with Roddy McDowell and Natalie Wood and Robert Wagner and Vincent Price and just, tons of people that I grown up watching, Fernando Lamas, Jane Wyman, all these different
Right.
wonderful Robert Goulet, I remember seeing Robert Goulet and Carol Lawrence do, I forget even what the show was, but
Yeah.
and I'm like 11 years old with my little cat's eye glasses, standing somewhere. I've got a picture of me standing, getting their autograph after their show, and now I'm getting to work with him. Never got to work with Carol, but just to get to work with people that you've grown up watching, some of the great character actors, or like Cesar Romero. I was so thrilled. As soon as on my first day on Falcon Crest, I cornered Cesar and said, so Cesar, what was it like working with Marlene Dietrich in 33 and Devil is a Woman? And he says, what do you know about old movies? I said, I love old movies. So then I got all the dish. You get the dish when they know you care and you like it.
Well, you're doing a podcast with
Hmm.
your sister,
I am.
and you mentioned that it's all about the joy of life. What is it that you mean by the joy of life? I know what I mean, but what do you mean?
I think, and especially as you get older, and especially in turbulent times, it's really important to find the joy in little things every day. Taking a walk, getting back to nature, somebody's kindness, a kind word in the morning, a good morning, just the little things in life that bring you joy. I think you latch on to those and to always find joy in things. It's one thing I've seen in some of my friends as they've gotten older is getting very negative about everything and making themselves be old and just disappearing into it, like I can't do that anymore. And I'm like, hell, of course you can. Get out and do it.
Right.
So it's trying to keep yourself entertained and challenged, constantly challenged with learning new things. And that's one way the
Absolutely.
podcast has been really good. I mean, I know nothing about tech, and I had never heard a podcast. Came out and did yours with you, so I had never
Right.
actually listened to one. And so trying to learn something totally new in a field that I know nothing about, with technology I know nothing about, has been challenging. And anything that makes you learn.
Right. Well, this group has taught me so much that I just absolutely love it here.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to chat with people because each one has an incredible life story.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that trying new things, reach out, try something new, something that you haven't done before. And I think you're a prime example of that.
Well, I just think it's very important, to keep challenging yourself and not allow yourself to sort of drift into senescence, as it were. So, yeah, I think that's
Absolutely.
important. And my sister and I are loving doing it.
Oh,
And
you're great together.
can I say the name? Is it okay?
Oh, yes, you
It's
can.
it's called Two Bitches from Texas, and and it's like, so it's very eclectic. And so, but one of our guests is a friend of mine. I first met on Donnie and Marie in the green room 30 years
Wow.
ago. John Edward, the psychic.
Sure.
He's one of our guests. And so he was kind enough to give me a reading about a year ago. And one of the things he said was to start thinking out. And he didn't use the term outside the box, but that was kind of what it was. Is don't limit yourself to just sitting around waiting for acting parts. Start thinking of other things, write, do other things. And that made me start thinking maybe about doing a podcast, because my sister and I grew up in the theater together and we love working together. But she's in Texas and I'm here, and there hadn't been much opportunity. But I thought, if a podcast, that's a new thing that we don't know how to do yet, but we could do that together remotely, because that's how you can work now,
Right.
not having to be in person. And so we started putting it together and found our lovely producer, Ben. And then we started talking about, like, how do you come up with a name? And, everything we were thinking of seemed too boring or too cutesy. And finally, I just said, well, it's really just two bitches from Texas sitting around talking about how to save the world, So then Ben says, oh, that's good. So,
Liz Teller told me once that the most important gift that she ever got was, I thought, the diamond, the Hope diamond that
Burton.
Richard Burton gave her. And she said no. She said when they completed National Velvet, they gave her the horse.
Oh,
And at 16 years old, that was the wonderful gift of, a
yeah.
lifetime. What gift have you been given that's meaningful to you?
Oh, I don't have too many things that have been given over the years. I've dated men who didn't give gifts too much. So,
That's all
but
right.
I treasure an astronomy book that Johnny Carson gave me when we were dating,
Ah,
and my watch from my fiance who's passed away now, that I never take off except the shower. But I mean, physical gifts, not that many, because unfortunately for me, nobody gave me something the size of a horse. They usually send fruit baskets or flowers, so when you finish a show. So.
I'm watching Johnny Carson reruns.
Isn't he
And
great?
oh, he's terrific. And I saw that Melanie Griffith and Sally Fields or whatever, they're nervous when they come on the show. And he explains that, most actresses have a script and they can follow the script. But when they have to ad lib, and if they're not selling anything, they get nervous. But I just think he handles it very well. How many times were you on Johnny?
Oh God, I don't know. I was on a number of times too when he wasn't the host with Joan Rivers.
Oh,
I
yes.
remember I was out with Joan one time and she asked me how old I was with Shelley Winters. Shelley went out ahead of me, and I had done a TV movie with Shelley, so I knew Shelley. Anyway, Shelley was out ahead of me, and Shelley really likes to be the center of attention. So, then they bring the new guest out, and that guest moves down. Well, Shelley doesn't want to leave. And so I'm talking, and Joan kept asking me questions. One thing she said was, "How old are you?" And I told her the truth. And, but Shelley just keeps interrupting because she wants to be on. So finally, I just gave it to her. I just said, I said to Joan, "Do you know how fabulous this lady is? Do you know how many Oscars she's won? Do you know how wonderful she is?" And start talking about Shelley. And then Shelley, after the show, she says, "Oh, that was a good segment." Because we talked about me.
Well, it's funny because he cornered Betty Davis the other night and he said, "Is there anyone that you hated to work with?" She said, "Yes, Faye Dunaway," because she was just about herself. She didn't care about any of the crew, any of the other co-stars, but she just worried about herself.
Well, I mean, I was Faye's double on Bonnie and Clyde, and she
Right.
was always nice to me,
Oh, good.
when I was a kid. But when I finished the show with Shelley, she came running down the hall at the Tonight Show with the lifts loose, flapping, the wig off, and the girdle half done, and came running down the hall. And she says, "Don't ever tell them how old you are. You don't care now, but you will." It's like advice.
Well, you don't look your age. You
Well, you're
look
kind.
ravishing.
You're
And
kind.
I think it was funny the way you mentioned about when you would go for an audition. They said, "You're too nice to act yourself, that you have to be a sinister. You have to be more sinister."
Well, I always thought I'd end up playing ingenues, is with the way I look. But when I got cast on Search for Tomorrow, I was a bad guy. But then my first job out here, I wasn't. I was an ex-Peace Corps worker, blind ex-Peace Corps worker with my hair in a ponytail. And I thought, oh, well, now I don't have to do all the glam stuff anymore. But my first TV movie I went in for, and it was a ripoff of Carrie. Do you guys remember the movie Carrie with the telekinesis? Well, that had come out the year before. So this was kind of a TV movie version of Carrie. And Kay Lenz was playing Carrie, and she was the queen of TV movies. And Chuck Fries was the producer, who was the king of TV movies at the time. And so he has me. It's a story about this girl who she and her sister are going to college. The sister wants to join this fancy sorority, but she's torn between her love for her sister, who's being rejected by the sorority, and wanting to be the hip kid. He has me read for the sorority queen, and I said, well, "Can I read for the sister?" Because, actor. I said, "I think she's more interesting because she's got gray areas. She's pulled in different directions." And he says, he's already said, "No, you got the part." Back then, they would do that. They'd say, "Yeah, you got the part." And I said, "Well, can I do?" He says, "I want a brunette." I said, "I'll wear a wig." We go back and forth. Finally, he says, "Honey, you haven't been here very long, have you?" And I said, "No, sir." And he said, "Let me explain something to you. I can find a good ingenue anywhere, but a good bitch is hard to find." And if the bad guy doesn't work, the whole movie doesn't work. Think about Shane without Jack Palance, and he goes down this whole list of movies where the bad
Right.
guy is very pivotal. So just take the part, okay? I said, okay. And I'm thinking, oh, well, it's this little TV movie. It's a little horror movie. Nobody will see it. Well, it was the #1 TV movie of the year.
Wow.
And I have had people, and men especially, come up for decades. I loved Initiation of Sarah. But it was one of those things that kind of launched me on a career of just playing bitches. So,
Well, you play it well.
oh, thank you.
That's
Thank
good
you.
acting. That's good acting. But at any rate, people inspire me. And I can remember working with Hubert de Givenchy.
Oh, I
And
loved him.
he's so wonderful. And of course, he and Audrey Hepburn had a great friendship. He was doing a collection. And at that time, I was working for Martex. And I got to know him real well. And he invited us to Le Jonger, which is his house in the Loire Valley. And we went. And I thought to myself, just watching this man, he's just so down to earth. You think of him as being a very fine designer, which he is. But I thought to myself, I could do that. I don't know why, but that's why I got into furniture design,
Oh, for
because of him.
Givenchy. Oh,
And when I left New York, he wished me a lot of luck. And then he came out here for a retrospective. And I got to see him again and meet Audrey, which was a thrill.
oh. I wish I'd gotten to meet her. What a wonderful actress and just an amazing human from everything I've heard.
Well, she did Gardens of the World for next to nothing.
Yeah.
Because she just loved gardens.
Yeah.
And she was as beautiful inside as out. She just really was.
I always heard that. I got to meet him. He actually gave me a dress
Wow.
for some event I was doing, and it was all about Givenchy. So he gave me a dress, and we had the fitting and all of this, and just so lovely, so elegant, very
Well,
old school.
he thought when Audrey first came to his office that it was Katharine Hepburn.
Oh,
And he was all excited. And then when he came to the door, here's this waif
Yeah.
coming in. But he changed her life.
Yeah.
And she used her clothes as another character. That's what made her brand. And I just was very, very impressed. Now, I know that people have questions.
anybody have a question?
So, Deborah, right here.
Which role has meant the most to you personally and why?
Well, my favorite TV role was Paper Dolls. I played a model agency, kind of Eileen Ford run amok on Paper Dolls. I loved that show the most. But it's these odd things. I did a staged reading of something called Grace Notes and Anvils at the Odyssey Theater about 10 or 15 years ago. And it's all about dealing with grief. And my fiance would come to that every performance. And driving home one time, he said, I think this is the most important work you've ever done. And we had so many people who would come to a show and then bring back their family and their friends and everybody else who was grieving. Just putting grief in perspective, it seemed to touch a lot of lives. So I guess that's probably one that I felt actually meant something to people.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you. And Elaine, do you have a question?
You kind of answered my question, and it was about how rejections, how you handled your rejections from parts that you really, really wanted.
Well, it's kind of funny the way the public sees it. I remember I had a child who used to write to me in the 80s and give me career advice. And she was very sweet at one point and wrote to me that I should not have turned down Sophie's Choice. And I had to write back to her and tell her I did not turn down Sophie's Choice. They never offered it to me. It was not a mistake of mine. But it's hard, it's especially, I think, hard for women. We're judged in a different way even than men. And sometimes it's rejection because you won't play ball, if you know what I mean. And so you sort of have to learn to take that in stride too, that, you have your own moral choices and that
There's still the casting couch?
well, I'm talking 40 years ago. Believe me, there's still a casting couch. But yeah, and then you make up your mind that these are your morals and this is what you live by. And if I lose a part because of that, then so be it,
Yeah,
Not worth
absolutely.
sacrificing my soul.
Yeah, exactly. Any other questions?
I have two granddaughters, 11 and 14, and they're pursuing showbiz very seriously. Are there any words of wisdom that you would give them if they were here?
How seriously are they pursuing it right now?
They have managers and agents, and they're actually doing a lot of auditions. I'm glad you talked about rejection, because you do get a lot of rejection at the beginning. But they're very serious.
Well, my mother taught high school English, and when I was in town in Dallas, sometimes she would have me come over and talk to the drama class, and I'd do an hour with the drama class, and I would give the advice to the drama class that my mentor gave to me when I was about 15 and said, "Do you think I could do this for a living?" And he said the best thing anybody can say, which is, "If there is anything else in life you can do and be happy, do that." And so I had given that advice to the high school class. My mother said, "Well, I got a little complaint. You were kind of negative." And I said, "Mom, any kid, I can save them the heartbreak of this business and go get a degree in something they can make a living at. I have done them a huge favor. If they can be discouraged by my saying that to them, they shouldn't be in this business." So, but your grandkids are already in the business. So, but that's the main thing, is to always be kind to people, to not take yourself too seriously. Because I started in the theater, I did everything. I did props, I did costumes, I did sound and lights, I did everything. And so Patrick Duffy and I were talking about this on the podcast we did with him. To this day, at the end of a show, the wardrobe people will come and say, "We love you. You always hang your clothes up." Yes, because I did wardrobe. I know what it's like to come in and find everything strewn on the floor. And the prop guys will come over, "We love you. You never walk off with the props." Because I did props, and when that gun is supposed to be on stage and you can't find it, And so it's a respect for everybody, that it is a team effort. Anything in show business is a team effort. It's never all about you. And I don't know your grandchildren, obviously, but a lot of what I see with some of the younger generation now, with the influencers and all of these kids, they don't want to be actors. They want to be stars. And they have a whole other view of what a star is, which means you get to lord it over everybody. And that's not what a star is. A star sets the professional quality at the top of the show. How the star behaves, how the star treats other people, how the star is with everyone and treats it as a team effort. That sets the whole mood of the set. And so that's the advice I always give to anybody. Because even now, for years, I'll have people come up to me in a restaurant and say, "You won't remember me, but I did 2 days on Flamingo Road with you. And my first day on the set, you were the one who came over and said, 'Welcome to the set. How can I help you? Here's where the ladies' room is. I'll take you to the commissary at lunch.'" To reach out to make people feel welcome. And that's what it should be. And the theater is much better on the camaraderie than what film has become. Film used to be a lot more fun because you would sit around between scenes and you'd chat with everybody and get to know people and make friends. Now the kids are all on their phones. They don't want to talk to anybody. They go straight to their trailer. I was doing a story arc on a show, and I won't mention the name, about 15 years ago. And it was a hot show at the time, especially for young people. We were shooting at Paramount, and because of the way Paramount was set up, you would have to go to hair and makeup, and then they would put you in this golf cart and take you to the sound stage, which, of course, being a lady, it's like, "What's it doing to my hair?" So anyway, they're picking me up in the golf cart. I start to sit in the golf cart. This young man, who's one of the stars, not the big star, but one of the stars, pushes me out of the way, and I have to get on the back of the golf cart, so my hair's getting blown that way the whole ride. And then he walks in, never says hello. He walks in. Eventually, the director comes over and says, "Oh, have you met so-and-so?" And he says, "Hey." So I'm fine, I'm doing, and finally the director came over after we shot a couple of things that the kid had totally screwed up. He says, "I'm so sorry about that. I'm so sorry about his lack of manners." And I said, "It's okay. This show will be canceled, and I will still be working. I don't know what he'll be doing."
Right.
That's
good advice.
Yeah, to know that even after decades, that people remember the kindness, the grace of just making them feel welcome and part of the team.
That's what makes you you.
Oh, well, thank you. Well,
And thank you so much for coming here and sharing your wonderful personality
Well, you're
with
kind.
all of us. And if you're interested in this show or podcast, we would love to have your ideas from the audience. And thank you for sharing this wonderful experience
thank you
with
for
all
coming.
of us.
Thank you for
Thank
coming.
you. Thank you.